What are some true scary experiences that you Redditors have been through? Creepy strangers, unexplainable incidents, narrow misses, etc. Part 3. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. I don't know if this is the scariest, but it was certainly my most adrenaline pumped. So I used to play this really stupid driving game, back when gas prices weren't so terrible, back when I lived in the LA, Orange County area. Essentially, late at night my friends and I would follow people in our car just to see how long it would take them to figure it out and to see if we could get them to play along. Yes, I know this was stupid on both accounts. We had no reason, right, to probably scare people like that. Anyway, one night we decided to follow somebody wherever they went, even if it was on one of LA's many freeways. For those of you who don't live in LA, it's not uncommon for people to drive from one end to the other using 5 to 6 different freeways. So we tag our first mark and begin following him. He jumped on I-5 freeway and we follow him from the middle of Orange County to where I-5, the 10 and 110 or 101, can't remember, where he gets off at a street called Soto. For those of you unfamiliar with Soto or that area of Los Angeles, this is not a nice area to be in. Anyway, this guy pulls into some donut shop and does whatever. We didn't really feel like waiting around, so we immediately found a new mark in that area. Bad idea. Now I feel like I should mention at this point that we're doing this in a black Ford Explorer with tinted windows, so we probably look pretty intimidating. So we follow this new mark for maybe 2 minutes before he makes a right. He then makes an immediate left into a neighborhood, not a nice one. He then makes another immediate left, heading back in the direction of the original street that we turned right off of. This is a little weird, but we didn't think anything of it. He then makes another immediate left back onto the original street, Soto. At this point we know something is fucking wrong. Nobody makes 3 left turns just for fucking funsies. No more than 10 seconds after we each had our own, oh shit, epiphany did the car immediately flip a U-turn and a guy stuck his head out the window with a rather large pistol. He then attempted to back up and block us from escaping. Needless to say, my friend driving slammed on the gas pedal to the nearest street and raced down Soto towards the 10 freeway, speeding at upwards of 100 miles per hour. Now, I don't know who this gentleman was, but he looked like a gangster of some sort and he had the meanest fucking look I've ever seen on his face. My guess is he thought we were a rival gang or some such thing. Anyway, stupid game. Do not recommend. We never played it again. TLDR, followed people for fun at night. One turned out to be a LA gangster who attempted to trap us and, what I can only assume, shoot us with his large pistol. I was a firefighter on an aircraft carrier during quite a large fire at sea. I was fortunate that the fire never reached my area, but I could hear enough of the communications back and forth, the ones going over the shipwide 1MC loudspeakers, to know that it had the potential to get really bad. I heard later from some buddies up on the flight deck that 36 Sparrow and 18 Sidewinder missiles had been engulfed in flames for 45 seconds past their cook-off time, the time at which you must assume they could explode at any moment, so it came pretty close to being a bad scene. A few years ago me and some friends hiked up a creek until we found a suitable camping spot. We just pitched up on a sandbar we found with a nice fishing hole next to it. Later that day we hiked up the creek a bit more and found an abandoned partially built house. Pretty much just had the walls and roof up. There was a notice of permit violation on the door from several years before. Everything inside looked like it had been undisturbed for years. There was a few cans of PBR that had expired 2 years prior. The only way in or out was a primitive Forest Service road. We walked up the road for about an hour trying to find where it connected to a main road but couldn't find any evidence of civilization anywhere, so we headed back to the campsite. The next day we got completely obliterated and went back to the house. There was an old rusting car that was completely overgrown with brush. We had our fun destroying it, went through the abandoned house and kicked in the door to an old shed to explore it. It was a big drunken good time and we weren't hurting anything as this place had clearly been abandoned and its natural deterioration was doing much more damage than we could hope to. The next day me and one of the guys hiked a ways farther up the creek to find some better fishing. This would be a good time to point out that I'm almost always armed when camping until the booze starts flowing. So we were up the creek from the campsite with the old house between us and any hope of escape. After finding a spot to drop our lines and sharing the silence and peacefulness that you have on the last day of a camping trip, we heard it. Gunshots. Okay, no big deal. We're out in the middle of nowhere, in Northwest Washington. People shoot everywhere all the time. Then a dog. Close. So we get behind a tree and start staking out our path back. There was a big group of people at the house with a dog, and they were shooting rifles. They also appeared to be taking a close look at the busted-up car that we had gone to town on. They had driven in, so they obviously knew the house was there previously. These were some quite authentic rednecks, and there was literally no way to get help if something went down. We had hiked up the river for a couple hours, no cell reception, no one in earshot to call out to. I had my pistol on me, and I'm one hell of a shot with it, but if these guys did want to fuck with us, it was my 8-round mag of 45s versus several of them with rifles. So we got on our hands and knees and slowly worked our way through some blackberry vines, trying not to make enough noise to alert their dog. At one point in the vines, the dog heard something and started barking in our direction. I saw a rifle pointed our way while the dog was barking, but the brambles were thick enough that they couldn't see us. We barely made it back to the campsite without being seen. We immediately started packing up to the sounds of them shooting and loudly yelling. It was pretty terrifying, and at several points I thought we were going to be seen and have to go toe-to-toe with a bunch of rednecks with guns asking why we were on their property and why their stuff was all fucked up. Lesson learned. No matter how abandoned something looks, just leave it the fuck alone. You know how when you are a child, the shadows of your furniture in your room make weird monster shapes and you think maybe they're real? As a little girl whose father made her watch things like Tremors and The Blob, I had a real imagination problem. But my parents tried to reassure me that there were no monsters in my room. One night when I was in the 5th grade, I couldn't sleep. I looked at the end of my bed and there was another shadowy shape, but instead of looking like my boxy furniture, it had more of a person shape. I pulled my blanket over my head and kept telling myself that it wasn't real. I eventually fell asleep. The next morning there were police downstairs. Apparently someone had cut through the mesh part of the window and broke into our house. Nothing was stolen. They determined that he had only walked into my room and then left. Of course, this had horrified me. I still to this day carry a knife around with me if I'm completely alone in the house. It didn't really end there, though. A few nights later, I was having a sleepover across the street. I remember that night because the clouds were moving by faster than I had ever seen. And I watched them, transfixed, through a skylight. The next morning the police were at my house again. Apparently this person kept calling my house threatening to kidnap and kill me. And that particular night he broke in again to do just that. They caught him, and it turned out to be my next-door neighbor. A 15-year-old boy with some mental illness. He was hospitalized and my parents had a 5-year restraining order on him. TLDR neighbor attempted to kidnap me while I slept. Twice. A creepy incident happened when my best friend and I were shopping at Don Quixote in Tokyo. We were getting into an elevator on the 3rd floor when a guy in a thick scarf and sunglasses got on and said hi to us. We said hi back, assuming he was being friendly because he was a fellow foreigner. We got off the elevator on the 2nd floor, and so did he. As we walked around the store, we noticed that he seemed to be following us and smiling at my friend every time he passed us. This was quite disconcerting, so we decided to leave the store. We went to the Starbucks next door, hoping we wouldn't see him. Lo and behold, he comes in and stands behind us. As I pull my wallet out to buy my chai tea latte, he sees my ID. And says, "Oh, you go to school there? Very nice." I nervously nodded and bought my drink. I looked at my friend to signal that we should get the fuck out of there. I soon get my latte and we rush out of the store. I'm freaking out because this creepy dude now knows where I go to school, and he could easily then figure out where I live. We don't see him behind us, so we decide it's best to hide out in McDonald's. We go up to the 2nd floor and sit down. I drink my Starbucks. We talk about the guy, and I tell my friend that we should avoid going home until we are sure he is off our trail. My friend looks behind us and turns white. She whispers, "He's sitting behind us. Like 5 feet away. And he's staring at me." The dude followed us into McDonald's, and even though there were plenty of seats in a less crowded area of the restaurant far from where we were sitting, he sat right near us. He asked this poor Japanese girl sitting alone at a larger table if he could pop a squat right across from her so he could stare at my friend. He wasn't even eating any food. At this point we felt trapped, because the only way out we had to walk past him. We sucked it up and left, and as we passed him he started talking to us, asking us where we were going. We ignored him and quickly walked out. I told my friend that we needed to walk as fast as possible away from McDonald's, and take as many twists and turns as possible to get away from him. We did this, and we never saw him again. TLDR. My friend and I had a creepy stalker following us for about an hour. He found out what school we went to, but we never saw him again. Well, my sister ran away when she was 4 once. Our whole family checked the house for 45 minutes and still no sign of her. That's when we called the police. Our neighbors were checking around the woods near our house, too. I had no idea what happened to her. It turns out she was hiding under the side table in my parents' bedroom. It had a happy ending, but I was nervous and protective of my family for a while after that. TLDR. Eagle stole little sister from my mother's hands. I live close to the woods and I regularly walk my dog there. I was walking back there one day and I heard this growling noise. I looked around expecting to see someone's dog that had gotten loose, but instead I saw a freaking wolf stalking my dog. Well, my dog is about the size of a kitten that is a few months old. I ran up to him, picked him up, and ran as fast as I could towards the road. The wolf did chase us for quite some time, but as soon as we got to the road, some cars came and scared away the wolf. I thought I was going to die along with my dog. I swear someone was looking after me that day. Dr. My boyfriend and I came 2 feet from a mountain lion on a full moon. When I was a teenager, my parents lived in BFE, foothills of Mount Hood in Oregon. My boyfriend and I drove down a dark country road that we were very familiar with. We both grew up in the area. We left the radio on too long and the battery went dead. We started walking in the moonlight to a neighbor's house for help. We were walking side by side when I say the eyes. Adrenaline surged through me and I literally climbed my BF like a tree. I was sitting on his shoulder. The huge cat just stared at us for a second, then kept walking. We were hysterical for a while after that. I haven't retold this story ever. I used to work as a security guard. One night I got a real technical post at a local rail yard. I don't want to give away which state I'm, but I can just say it was fairly large and next to a large city. It was my first night, and this old-timer is showing me the ropes. There's a lot to do. I have to watch a gate as truckers go in and out with brand new cars loaded up on their trailers. I had to do a patrol through a large gated outdoor area that enclosed 5 sets of tracks that unloaded these new cars. It was a 12-hour night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Thankfully, I wasn't alone or I would have been seriously disturbed. There were drivers, who were dicks, and rail workers putting trains together. I forget exactly what time, but in the early AM I get a call from one of them in the security gate office. I'm told that someone, probably a bum, had strolled into the gated area. Now this area is the size of several football fields, filled with brand new cars with gas in the tank. This is a serious problem, and the whole reason I was there in the first place. To protect the probably tens of millions of dollars worth of cars. As I show up in a little golf cart, I speak with one of the rail workers who gave me a very vague description. A man wearing blue jeans. I was then tasked with finding the man in this huge place with about 80 million places to hide. It was clear he was probably a bum, and that the cars would offer a wonderful place to sleep for the night. So there I was, going through a huge field of cars. I shined my flashlight into the tinted windows of at least 100 cars. I was expecting to walk up on a bum, sleeping in a car or listening to the radio. Or worse yet, maybe someone there to steal a car. They all had keys in the ignition and gas in the tank for moving. I looked for almost an hour, and nothing. At last I went to the actual trains. They are huge, like the size of houses. Each one was easily taller than my house and half as wide. You don't realize how big trains are until you get there. I found myself shouting at the trains, and walking around them looking for that same bum. I was thorough, but I found nothing at all. Scared, miffed, and while having pissed off truckers honk their horns at me hundreds of meters away, I went back to the guard cabin. I had an argument with a trucker who was pissed at me for keeping him at the gate, and then a phone call from the railway guys asking if I had found the guy. I told them I looked for a long while, and couldn't find him. I supposed he may have jumped a fence to get away from me. I had looked everywhere. Another hour passes, and at 3 or 4 a.m., I forget exactly, I get a call. They found the man on the rail tracks. Right where I had been looking. I later learned that he was probably hiding on the tracks, where I wasn't likely to stick my head. Then when I said I couldn't find him, the rail workers moved the train again. He was found in parts. The largest piece was a hand. I was down at the beach with my mother and my little brothers. I was about 16 at the time, and they were about 5 and 3. We decided to go to the pool, with some girl I had just met. My 5-year-old brother had to go to the bathroom, so I walked him into the bathroom. I decided to make sure the other didn't pee in the pool, so I turned around to get him. The girl I was with was busy laying in the sun with her iPod in. I looked around and couldn't find my brother. It was the scariest and most horrifying thing I've ever seen, to look into the pool and see him writhing at the bottom, while she just sat there. My blood turned ice cold and I ran over and looked down and saw his eyes staring back up at me. I dove in and got him. I am still to this day haunted by this in my nightmares. Needless to say, fuck that bitch. My mom used to commute from southeastern PA to Baltimore 5 days a week, about 3 hours of driving a day. One time, late at night, she saw the flashing lights behind her. While confused because she wasn't speeding or anything, she pulled over. She immediately noticed that the car wasn't a Crown Vic or any standard-looking police car, and thus rolled the window down only an inch. The cop was dressed in blues but offered no badge. She asked to see a badge or proof of ID, and he just got angry and screamed for her to roll her window down. She still refused, and at this point he yelled that he was going to call for backup and she was going to jail for non-compliance. She replied that calling for backup would be a great idea at this point and continued to wait. He fumed for another 10 minutes until finally getting back into his car and speeding off without further warning. She called 911 from her corded car phone. I know, right? And they said they'd had reports of someone posing as an officer trying to lure women out of their cars. Holy shit. TLDR, my mom kept a level head and didn't get assaulted by a probably fake police officer. My husband and I were driving home from a city 2 hours away, and since it is a drive that I have done many times in my life, I sat back and read a book. Not even an hour into the drive, I felt the gravity of the car veering, and I looked up from my book to see why my husband was pulling over. Unfortunately, my husband was not pulling the car over. When I looked up, my eyes saw a vehicle crossing the median and veering into our lane, each of us doing 70, head-on. Luckily, my husband doesn't use cruise control and he keeps a cool head, so his quick thinking put our car into the ditch, narrowly missing the man coming at us. When the other guy ditched and while we were all talking to the police, the man said he had a blackout and didn't remember what happened. Much to our fright, however, the cop just told the man to get to a hospital and let the guy drive himself away. Very scary day, and I don't really read much in the car anymore. Closing parenthesis. A few. I'm a flight instructor, not full-time anymore, and I had a student with me in a Piper Aero IV, a 4-place retractable single, and the Lycoming crankshaft decided to break up while we training on a high-performance, low-altitude maneuver called 8s on pylons, which I've never liked. It was violent and loud as the engine ripped itself apart. I was in the right seat as the instructor, and we were shaking so bad, and oh man the noise, that I really thought the engine was going to rip off the mounts and fall away. I could hardly reach the fuel mixture to shut down what was left of the engine, we were shaking so bad. We landed in a farm field, where the farmer offered us cold beers. It was almost 100 that day and that beer looked like the best beer ever, but by then the sheriff was driving up and so we passed on the beer. But that wasn't close to my biggest pucker factor flight. Later, when I was flying a light twin for a local company, we penetrated some massively turbulent convective air in a storm, at night, in IMC, instrument meteorological conditions, 16 miles out over the Pacific trying to join the instrument approach to our airport. The rain was so hard I thought we might lose the windshield, the props were roaring in the rain, and we kept hitting our heads on the side windows and roof. For the first time in my life I really had this strong sense we would not survive. My altitude ranged from plus or minus 1,000 feet in what seemed an instant, and we rolled plus or minus 80 degrees just as fast. When we were on final, my crab on the centerline was about 60 degrees because of the crosswind. That night, at the hotel, we had several beers. I had read about pilots who penetrated such storms and didn't survive, and I thought I would never do that. But it happened so easily. We checked the weather, and the forecast was just for low overcast with stable high winds aloft, but calm on the surface. Oh, and I did row the Grand Canyon Colorado River in 1983 during those summer floods when the water was outrageously high and almost overtopped Glen Canyon Dam. Before flying, that was my high point of, oh shit. Oh, I also had a nighttime electrical failure in visual conditions teaching a private pilot a night cross country, but that was just instructive. Wait. Now that I think of it, I've had more than my share of those moments. Maybe it's my karma. TLDR. **** catastrophic engine failure while teaching flying, and a night flight into a building thunderstorm. Ah yes, the day that being a stoner nearly got me murdered. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of the southeast, and my town was actually completely surrounded by various ridges and mountains for as far as the eye could see. Naturally, being high school stoners, we took advantage of the woods to party in during the summer. One popular activity was to head out to a particular isolated creek in the state park to smoke, drink, whatever. The location was accessible only by a winding gravel road way off the beaten path, so it was the perfect spot for engaging in high school shenanigans. It was the best kept secret among the teenagers in the city, and no adults seemed to be aware of this adolescent free-for-all during the summer. My friends and I made the trip out there probably 4 to 5 times a week and would encounter dozens of other kids from our school and other schools. We would spend all day there partying and then bail around sunset. One particular day, my friend brought cheap Barton's vodka to drink rather than the usual awful Natty Light, and we got absolutely housed. Come time when everyone else was leaving around sunset, we were both way too drunk to drive. People offered us a ride, but there was no way in hell I was leaving my car out in the boonies to get stolen by a meth head, so we agreed to wait it out an hour or so to sober up. After every other person had left, we decided to park it by the creek and just chill, smoke a bowl, and take in the scenery. After an hour and a half, it was starting to get really dark. To get down to the creek, you had to climb, and pretty much fall, down a very steep hike where you are grabbing onto trees to keep from plummeting all 50 feet or so. We figured it would be a good time to do that before it got to be pitch black. Just as we were starting up trail to my car, we saw a shady-ass paint-peeling blue van pull up next to my car. The sliding door opened and about 9 Mexicans came out with rifles, and they threw a rope down the trail in order to get to the creek. It was clear that these guys were heading to a pot field somewhere in the mountains. I may have never been more terrified in my life to realize that my friend and I were weaponless, without cell phone service, and possibly between drug suppliers and their land. We quickly hopped across the stream on wet slippery rocks, but my friend fell into the stream and made a loud splash. I cursed under my breath as he rapidly climbed out and dove behind a huge boulder. We could hear them talking, and based on my limited Spanish, they knew we were very close by. By this time, it was getting really dark, so the Mexicans turned on flashlights and began coming down the trail. Luckily all of them went along the other side of the creek, except for one who was at the foot of the trail, standing between us and freedom. Over the next hour and a half, my friend and I went about a mile down the creek, climbed up a steep-ass incline, and crawled to my car like we were fucking plastic G.I. Joes. As soon as I jumped in and turned on the engine, we heard a gunshot in the air. Didn't look back.